This game would be a lot easier if when you hit a ball with right side spin like shown here, the ball traveled in a straight line like the blue line parallel to the stick. It doesn't do that. Instead, it takes a more complicated path like the white dash path here, and the details of that path depend upon a number of things, including what stick you use, the elevation of the stick, the humidity, what cloth is on the table, how much side spin you use, and how hard you hit. Many people think the way to deal with this situation is to develop a feel or an intuition by hitting a million shots on the pool table. I agree with that. You will develop that intuition and that feel more effectively and more efficiently, however, if you understand the basic effects and what they depend upon. The two effects are Squirt, which is also known as cue ball deflection, and Swerve, which is a minor masse effect. And it's best to start by assuming that you have neither, and you get the results shown here, and then add in the effects and discuss them one at a time. So here's Swerve with no Squirt. Notice that the cue ball starts off going straight along the blue line, and then it curves, and then it goes straight again in a direction angled off from the blue line. Note also that the direction of the curve is on the same side as the direction of the side spin. So what does Swerve depend upon? Well, here's the big one right here. If we make the cue more level, we get less Swerve. In fact, if you make the cue completely level, you get no Swerve at all. Unfortunately, we can't make the cue completely level because of the rail. Nevertheless, as level as possible is generally a good goal for all your pool shots. Here's what happens if you hit harder. The cue ball travels further along the straight line path before it turns, and then it angles off from the blue dashed line at the same angle as the softer shot. Hitting on slicker, generally newer cloth, has exactly the same effect as hitting harder because there's less friction between the ball and the cloth. So in summary for Swerve, the cue ball curves along the same side as you put the side spin on. The angle that it curves away from the straight line path depends upon the stick elevation, and where that curve happens depends upon the cloth and on the shot speed. Swerve is actually the biggest problem when hitting shots with side spin. So if the object ball is far away, you should avoid side spin unless the shot is particularly easy or you can hit it hard or the cloth is new. In the latter two cases, that means the cue ball might actually get to where it's going before the Swerve takes effect in any major way. And because of Swerve, you should always keep your stick as level as possible. So this is Squirt without Swerve. Note that the cue ball follows a straight line path. It's not curved. And note that that path is angled away from the blue dashed line in the opposite direction of the side spin. So what does Squirt depend upon? What about when you hit the ball harder? Well, the chips are not all in on this one, but the best evidence is that there's no major effect here. Change the elevation of the stick? No effect. Slicker cloth? No effect. Here's the biggie. If you change sticks, you get a different amount of Squirt. You can get half the Squirt or twice the Squirt just by changing the stick. What causes Squirt? Shown on the left is the position of the tip from the beginning to the end of the tip ball collision, and you can see that the tip rotates around on the ball as the ball begins to rotate. So something is pushing the tip to the right, the cue ball is, and therefore the tip is pushing the cue ball to the left, and that's the force that causes Squirt. As people like Bob Jewett and Ron Shepard knew a decade ago, the amount of Squirt depends upon the mass in the first few inches back from the tip, the so-called stick end mass. Evidently, the people at Clausen who made Predator shafts knew this as well. You could see what they did here to reduce the end mass. They hollowed out the end of the stick. I'd like to illustrate Swerve and Squirt. And what I'd like to do is to illustrate one at a time, but of course I can't really get rid of either one. So I'll do the best I can. This is my lowest Squirt shaft. It's a Predator 314 shaft that's been turned down to about 12.5 millimeters. So this squirts as little as possible, and we're trying to look at the effect of Swerve here. Remember what we expect. We expect the cue ball to come down along the white line at some point if I hit it with an elevated cue and some side spin, and then to veer off that line and then to go to a straight angle from that line. And that angle there depends upon the elevation of the stick. Where that angle is achieved, like that, depends upon the speed of the shot for a given elevation, or equivalently depends upon the slickness of the cloth. So, first, as level as possible. Virtually no Swerve, there's a little bit there. Then if I increase the elevation to a medium elevation, it angled off about like that. Go to a higher elevation, it angled off about like that. Okay. Now let's try to keep the elevation constant at the medium level and go from soft to hard. Turned off right about there. A little bit harder. Turned off about there. Harder still. Turned off about there. We can go to an even harder one. And that made it virtually all the way down the table without turning. Okay, that's Swerve. What about Squirt? I'll go to a little bit higher Squirt cue. This is an Andy Gilbert cue. And first I'll try to hit with as level as possible a stick so that there isn't any swerve. And you can see that the ball, I hit with right side spin, but the ball went off to the left, a couple of ball widths down there. If I hit with left side spin, the ball went off to the right. Well, how do I increase the squirt? Remember, the squirt's supposed to depend upon the mass near the end of the stick, so we can do a scientific experiment where we change the mass near the end of the stick. And here's our mass changing apparatus right here. And here we are changing the tip end mass on this Timmy Scruggs cue. And the hypothesis is that the squirt is going to increase, and perhaps it's going to increase quite a bit because we've changed the end mass quite a bit. So let's see what happens. I'll teach you this in pool school. That was not a miscue. That's actually the amount of squirt here. I don't know if that was a miscue or not. One more time. Not a miscue. Okay, what if we change the location of the end mass and put it down here? There's many people that think that if you go to a stiffer stick that resists the motion down here, that has a flex point a little further up, that they're going to have more squirt. And this might be the best, simplest way to model that right here. Pretty much a normal amount of squirt. If different sticks squirt by different amounts, how do we quantify that? Well, there's something called the squirt pivot point, which is a length in inches that's characteristic of a given stick. And shown here are two cue ball paths for two different sticks, the two white dashed lines. And here's an interesting observation made by Pat Johnson. You're welcome, Pat. Look at the green rectangle on the cue ball. The length of that is the tip offset, how far off center you're hitting with side spin. If you follow the cue ball paths down the table until the path of the cue ball deviates from the blue line by exactly equal to the tip offset, then that distance you've traveled is the squirt pivot point of the cue. So you can see here that the smaller squirt pivot point cue is the one that squirts more. If you bear with me here, you can understand why it's called a pivot point. Shown to the left of the cue ball here are several sticks that range from pointing at the cue ball to hit it with left side spin to pointing at the cue ball to hit it with extreme right side spin. And the relationship of these sticks is that they are all pivoted about the same point near the ferrule, very close to the tip. You look at the yellow lines to the right, those are the range of aims for those 5 sticks. With squirt, the ones that you hit with right side spin are going to go to the left because of squirt. The ones with left side spin are going to go to the right with squirt. So the red lines are the directions considering squirt. So the yellow triangle here is actually a triangle of aim directions, and the red triangle is a triangle of cue ball directions. Here's what happens if we pivot about a different point, about a point a few inches further back. Both triangles get smaller. Pivot about a point even further back, and both triangles get smaller still. And you might be able to guess what's going to happen on the next slide. Bingo. There's a certain number of inches back from the tip on every stick, such that if we pivot about that point to apply anything from extreme left to extreme right English, the direction of the stick may change a fair amount, but the direction that the cue ball travels stays exactly the same. That's the squirt pivot point.